Previously on The Grind.
I've never known what I want to do. That's always been my problem. But I haven't found that thing that, just drives me.
Yeah, but Ignacio's waiting. Like he needs that boombox over his head, blasting Peter Gabriel type moment. He wants a job that makes him do that.
So what does that look like in Ignacio's world?
Well, you know what? He called me a couple months ago and he thought he found that opportunity.
This was a project management position that he just reached out to me like a week ago, and he's like, in late April, we're going to need a manager. I wonder if you would be interested. And I was like, yeah, for sure.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Grind. It's your host, Mark.
Hello, my name is Warren. I'm a podcaster, broadcaster, and breakfaster, and I enjoy long walks on the beach.
Warren, what's that about there?
Well, the other day I was sitting in a coffee shop and I was editing this show, enjoying my Java, and a large group of people came in, and all of a sudden they're all introducing themselves to each other that way, and it was really bizarre and kind of Twilight Zone-y.
Okay, what were they doing?
Well, at first I thought they were like this support group. And then I was like, well, maybe they're speed dating. And finally I asked them and they were like, oh, we're this science and technology meetup group.
Okay, so it was like a networking event.
Right. And they were all just there just to connect. And I told them I was a podcaster, and a few of them even asked for my card.
Nice.
Have you ever been to one of these?
Yeah, man. I've been a card collector, gone to some meetings, shook a few hands.
Well, it was totally weird for me.
Yeah. Okay, wait. So I'm starting to think, Warren, that it might not be a coincidence that you're telling me this story right now.
Is anything we do in the studio a coincidence, Mark?
Well, I guess not when you put it like that. So that's right, listeners. Today we're talking about one of the most discussed, most daunting topics in all of job searching.
Networking. So right now we're following Ignacio, a recent grad who has had some employment success, but he's still looking for that one job that both sings to his heart and builds his skills. What does he think about networking? Is he networking at all?
Well, yeah. So after last episode, we set him up with a plan. We made a spreadsheet, all the targets he's going to get to, the companies he wants to meet. I even set him up with, like a trial networking assignment. I had him talk to my cousin Ryan. So let's see what he has to say.
How are the networking conversations going? Have you reached out to anyone else?
Yeah, I reached out to the Appsio guy, but he gave me some advice, but it was nothing like he gave me like a pretty like a long reply and about advice and stuff, but it didn't seem like I could be like, hey, is there any opportunities at Appsio? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you ask him to get coffee, or did you ask him just questions over email?
I just asked some questions over email.
Okay,
I probably messed up. With your cousin, the talk went well. It was cool. He seems like a really chill guy, but it was nothing like, I didn't have an ask, man. I didn't know what to say.
Yeah, you got to get better at your ask, man. You gotta close, man. It's like sales.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he's having a pretty hard time with these emails.
Yeah, man. I mean, networking is hard. Like, how do you learn to network? It's almost just like meeting people, right?
Yeah.
So I was scratching my head because this actually is something that I've studied before, and I was thinking, like, where did I learn this? Who are the best networkers in the world? And I flashed to this business school case that I read, which was about a woman who is widely considered the world's best networker. But her name is Heidi Roizen. She's a VC, so a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. And I actually practiced some of my networking skills, and I cold emailed her about the grind and said, do you want to be on? Can you help our young people?
Whoa.
And she said, yeah.
So basically, you landed the one person who wrote the book on networking.
Well, more specifically, they wrote the networking case about her.
Wow.
So without further hesitation, here's my conversation with Heidi. So Heidi, when I Google your name, the first 10-ish articles that come up are all about networking, and you are like a master networker. So how did that become such a central part of your brand?
Well, it's an interesting story. I guess I organically was always a person who felt that relationships were very important. And I started out starting a company with my brother, and we didn't have any money for marketing, and we didn't have any money for business development. So it's all about going out and meeting people and getting the word out. And I did a lot of that over the years. And one day a reporter at USA Today wrote an article about me, about how I was this great connector of Silicon Valley. This is like 20 years ago now. That article led to Harvard Business School, a professor at Harvard Business School contacting me about doing a case study about how I build my business network. And that case study ultimately came out in the year 2000 and is remarkably popular. To this day, it's still taught in all the leading business schools literally around the world. It's rather astounding to me.
Totally. Yeah, that's how I heard about you, Heidi. And it made such an impact. I mean, we read hundreds of cases, and for whatever reason, and I'd love to actually just pick your brain about it, this was like one of the ones that stuck with me and all my classmates. And you kind of are like a mini celebrity, I guess, in like the business school world. Is that weird for you? I mean, do you ever get people who...
I'm the Snooki of Harvard Business Review. But, a lot of people have asked me, why do I think the case resonates? I think because you go to business school to learn business, and yet business is all about people and about yourself as a person. It's not about transactions. It's about you and your relationships. And so I think it sticks out among the business school cases as something super different than most of the cases, which are, here's a problem, how would you solve it?
Totally. And in reality, those problems, we all hope we'll solve them, but they will come up once or twice in a career, whereas networking is like a fundamental part of every day of your job if you're doing it right, in my opinion.
Right. And in fact, this is one of my little bones to pick. I hate the word networking, because to me, networking sounds like, it's almost like the monkey bars, right? I'm going to get at the end and I'm going to swing from one to the next to reach my goal. And I hate that, right? To me, it's about understanding the idea that human relationships are the foundation. And, I hate to go all big picture on you here, but I really believe human relationships are the foundation of happiness. It isn't even just getting ahead in work. It's there's countless studies that have shown that happiness is about meaningful work and meaningful relationships. And so why not have both of those through the work you do?
I'm with you. I mean, but did it always come natural to you? I mean, is that just how you always viewed happiness, and you were always a person who was trying to make new friends even when you were younger?
No, I mean, I think that I will admit I've always been a more extroverted person. And so I have the advantage of being that person who likes to meet and talk to other people. But to this day, it's not like I have a secret superpower. I think anyone can develop the ability to go and make new relationships. I think that, just like anyone else, if I'm at home and I'm sitting here with my dog and I'm reading a book and I'm supposed to be at a cocktail party in a half an hour, I'd rather sit at home with my dog than go to a cocktail party, right? I mean, I am not, I think we all have this natural inherent fear and discomfort with going and sticking ourselves out there. But, for me over time, I have just come to realize that some of the most amazing relationships I have come about through what I call controlled randomness. The idea that you go somewhere and you don't know specifically who you're going to meet, but you know that the group is interesting for some reason, either because you're in the same industry, or you were in the same school, or maybe you practice the same faith, or maybe you like the same sports team, or something that gives you a point of connection. And you're going to go make some amazing relationships. So one of the pieces of advice I give people is start small. Don't walk in and think it's not a contest to collect business cards. Find two people in the room that you resonate with. And if you're scared of doing that, make it a game. Like I have this thing I tell my students to do. Walk in a room and find the two people with the most interesting shoes, right? And go talk to them and just start a conversation by saying, I decided that tonight I'm going to look at everyone's shoes and pick the pair that is most interesting to me, and you're wearing them. Tell me about your shoes. I mean, it's a fun way to start a conversation.
Yeah. And you'll definitely stick out. That person will remember you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's super practical. I love that tip. I think people would be comforted to hear that even for you, you have to pump yourself up to get yourself out of the chair and get to events. And I hear over and over again talking to folks that and I'm sorry to use the word again, but networking or forging these relationships is one of the things that they dread the most. And in fact, something that they abstractly say, you find people say, oh, I hate networking, or, oh, networking, so this or that or sleazy. I mean, why do you think it gets a bad rap? What are people not understanding about it?
I think the way people think about networking is I have a goal and my goal is a transaction. And I need to go smarm my way through a crowd to get my transaction done. Most people don't like doing that, right? Most people don't like being in that position. If you were to say, my goal in life is, I believe that the more interesting people I know, the more enriched my life will be. And I equally have something to share. I have things that are interesting about me, whatever they are. And I would like to go through life finding fellow travelers on the life path that I resonate with. And if you think about that as an opportunity, I think it's funny that a lot of people I know, they don't like networking, but they like shopping. And I'll say, well, shopping's kind of the same thing. You don't have to pick any one of those items, but you go in a store and you think, what looks interesting to me? And what might I like to have in my life? I think it's a lot of it is the attitude and a lot of it is the objective. Most of the people who are in my network have come to me either because we had a work product to work on, and I believe those are the strongest relationships, right? Your coworkers, the fellow parents at the school, your fellow students that you work on papers, the students that I teach at Stanford. You form relationships because you already have to have a relationship because you're working on something, and the quality of the relationship is kind of up to you and that person. And then some of the other ones are just that I meet interesting people, whether it's you're sitting on an airplane and you chat up the person next to you, or you go to an event and you ask the two people next to you sitting at, before the speaker starts, hi, who are you and why are you here? Things like that. You'd be surprised at how many interesting people. So I think the takeaway here is, if you worry less about what your pay is going to be for the relationship, right? If you worry less about, a transaction, and you just worry more about filling your life with interesting people, I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of it.
Well, totally. And it actually reminds me of a question I was going to ask you. I mean, I think one of the things that you always hear about, really good relationships is that, you want to strive for, a win-win, or you want to strive for reciprocity over time. But if you're just starting out, it might be easy to feel like, look, what do I have to offer? I'm a college kid, or I'm 22 years old. I don't have anything to give. But if you look at it as I'm just trying to meet interesting people and, have interesting conversations, you can be interesting no matter where you are in your career, right?
Everyone has something to give. Everyone has something to give. And that's the thing that, and it is, I understand, sure, when you're older and you've been around a long time and you have a higher position and, yes, you may have on paper more to give. But I look at students today and I think you have a view of the world I don't have. You're usually far more facile with technology. My kids laugh at me because they send me snaps every day, and I, to this day, have never sent them a snap. I text them back and they're like, Mom, you're so lame. You understand things we don't understand. You have a view of the world that's fascinating. And, even crazy things, like I've had students of mine say, I want your time. I've had them bartend for me. I've had them do physical, like one of them was a physical trainer, like a personal trainer. And he said, I want career advice from you. So I'm going to, how would you like to exercise while I'm asking you questions? I'm like, I don't know. But, I've had people babysit for me. I mean, it is kind of funny, but people have said, look, let me give something. What can I give? Number one, I think everyone has something to give. And number two, most people are wired to be helpful. Most people want to pay it forward. And this is another tip. If you ask someone who is, a more senior person who has more pressure on their time, who has less time to give, hi, I don't know what to do. Can I buy you a coffee and will you please spend an hour giving me career advice? That doesn't sound very appealing. If, on the other hand, you approached someone and you said, I've studied you. I think your bio is super interesting because because I have an interest in a thing that you do. I am deciding between two career paths, and I have 3 questions to ask you. Here are my 3 questions. do you have 10 minutes to get on the phone with me and answer them? Or do you, make your ask more specific, more relevant to the person, and a shorter time frame. If you ask someone for an hour of their time and they don't even know you, that's a lot. That's a big question. If you ask someone for 10 minutes, or even just please answer this question on an email, I'd be so appreciative. Most people are going to be inclined to want to be helpful, I believe.
Totally. And you're also demonstrating something to them by that ask, that you've actually thought about how to use their time, and you've gone a little bit further in your journey, rather than we've all done it and we've all received an email like this where you can tell someone's to-do list was like network, and they sort of blasted like 5 people in their, or 50 people in their email inbox, and it's more like, let's get the coffee to catch up, which for a good friend is fine, but for a first interaction, you want to be a little more pointed, I think.
What's interesting though is if someone sends me an email and says, I'd like to pick your brain in general about advice, I send them back a link to a speech I gave, which is an hour long, where I really put all my best advice right in that speech. And I say, watch this speech, and afterwards feel free to send me 3 questions on email, and I'll be happy to answer them. 99% of the people never watched, they were perfectly happy to spend to ask for me to use my time, but they're not that happy to prepare by using their own time. And I would argue the winners are the ones who do their homework. So, the difference between a person who just in general wants something and a person who even spends 10 minutes figuring out who they're asking the favor of, how to hone that favor, and how to make it compelling to the person to answer, those are the winners.
Great. Okay, so you sort of nailed it already, but I just want to hone on this a bit. So much of what we do today is networking via email, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, are there certain tips besides the one you've just given to get people's attention via email? Maybe catchy subject lines, short responses, mentioning someone else's name, getting someone to, of the 200 you get. Yeah.
Like I said, keep it short and make it very direct, and give me some anchor that's a human connection, right? Did you go to the same school as me? Did you resonate with an article because you two had, divorced parents and you grew up moving around a lot with your mom, or whatever it is? What is our human connection? What is something? Don't use a name unless you're really sure. Like, I can't tell you how many times people say, so-and-so told me to contact you, and I reach out to so-and-so and say, hey, tell me about this person. They'll say, I have no idea who this person is. That's a killer. Like, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Short emails. This is the thing that people will send me an email and they, let me tell you a little bit about myself, and it's 3 pages long. I can't, again, it's not that I don't want to be a nice person, but I have a full-time job. I have a lot of things to do. And so short and sweet. The other thing is everyone should pay attention to their social media. You should have a really good profile on LinkedIn. I don't care if you're a high school student. You should have a profile on LinkedIn. You should be sure it reflects who you are. It doesn't have to have a lot of work. We know if you're 16 years old, you don't have a lot of work experience. But a LinkedIn profile and putting a LinkedIn URL in your signature line on an email is the most efficient way for me or anyone to know who you are in a business context, right? So that to me is the no-brainer that all people should do.
So a lot of what we've talked about so far, or at least in the last few questions, has been about technology and how that has changed how you meet people and build relationships. What do you think is good about that, and what can be a trap we fall into? I guess the question is sort of like, how is this different from how it used to be 20, 30 years ago, and what things are still really the same?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the thing I most love about technology and the thing I most hate about technology. Unfortunately, like most things, double-edged sword. The most loved thing is I can find out about anyone and I can get to anyone relatively easily. So I can think of someone that I haven't talked to in 10 years, and I can find them on LinkedIn or Facebook and send them a note and get back and hear back. I can research anybody and learn a whole lot about them in a really short period of time, and usually find those connection points, right? I can get to someone through a mutual contact by figuring that all out. So technology is wonderful about that. Here's the downside. We are currently a society of constant partial attention. Everybody's on their device all the time. Everybody's, you used to go to an airport lounge and chat the person next to you, right? When you're waiting in the lounge or in the line waiting to get on the plane. And now everybody's just on their devices all the time. So there are people I literally met waiting for flights that now I'm not going to meet those people anymore. In my office, I have to literally, I joke about it. It's like, in the olden days, in the Wild West, when they had to tell people to leave their guns outside the saloon, right? They didn't want, people to come in and drink and then start shooting. I joke that, I'm going to put one of those, gun holsters outside our office, but it's to hang your iPhones. Because I don't want, when people walk in a meeting and an entrepreneur is presenting to us, I want the attention on that entrepreneur. I don't want the attention on people's devices. And yet we're, and there's even brain, research and science about the chemistry of why when you hear that ping, it's like a little reward mechanism, and you want to look at who cares enough about you to email you. We psychologically, we're wired to be that way, but it's a problem. I really do think it's a problem. So I encourage everyone to find, certainly if you're in a live meeting with a person, give them your full attention, and every once in a while put that thing down and, get out in the real world.
Totally. And I find that, just to put another, point on what you said and relate it to, I think, some of the work I've done with some of the folks who I think will listen to this show, is they put so much effort into getting meetings, right? And they do a great job with the proper email protocol and having a good LinkedIn and networking virtually. And then they get in their room and they haven't really either prepped or thought about how to show up in person, in a real live conversation, which fundamentally, to build a relationship, that still needs to be part of it. You need to have at least some interactions in person. And so I think it's easy to think, well, I got in the room. But in reality, you need to work on
the table stakes, right? Now
exactly.
It's when you're in the room.
You need to work on your game in that setting as well. That's super helpful. So I think one of the great things, I love the way you framed, relationship building up front. And I think one of the things that's hard for younger folks to realize is that it just gets better over time, right? Having relationships with folks and building them when you're 22, you don't really even start to see the fruits of your labor, I guess, or it doesn't really even start to get fun and interesting until, 10, 15 years down the road, when folks in your network go in really interesting places and relationships deepen and you've had multiple interactions with folks. So I'd love to hear you talk about, back to this frame of, it's really about relationship building, what it means to maintain a good group of friends and professional associates over time, and what can be the benefit of thinking of it past just that single first interaction.
Well, I think there is. Again, it's interesting that, if you look at the people that I interact with, some of them are newer people. Some of them are people that, I'm at the older end of the spectrum for venture capital. A lot of the people I work with are 20 years younger than I am, so I'm working with a group of people that obviously I didn't know for a long time because they're younger than I am. They weren't around, when I was cutting my teeth. But then I also think it's interesting, I work for DFJ, this venture firm, the founder, the D, Tim Draper, was in my freshman dorm. I've known Tim longer than any other person at that company. One of my other dorm mates was this guy, Jeff Rakes, who was employee number 27 at Microsoft. Microsoft was a tiny little company when I started to get to know everybody at Microsoft because my friend Jeff went there. And in fact, I remember at the time I said to him, he left Apple to go to Microsoft. And you have to remember at this time, these were little tiny companies, but I thought Apple was a better place. And I'm like, dude, why are you going to Microsoft? That's this tiny little company up there in Seattle. You're crazy. And it's worked out okay for him. He ended up being the president, and he was CEO of the Gates Foundation, and now he's chairman of the board of trustees at Stanford. So it's worked out okay for him.
He did okay.
But it's interesting. My belief is if you pick fellow travelers in life that you find interesting and who resonate with you, over time they'll do interesting things. And it doesn't mean they all have to be successful business people. My college roommate is a Swami and lives in an ashram, and I keep in touch with her too, and she's awesome and interesting. And when I have a conversation with her, I really enjoy that conversation. So I think the point is more that we all only have limited time and we all only have limited attention. And at the end of the day, you're only going to have deep relationships with so many people, and you have to pick those people carefully. And sometimes people will come in and out of your life too. Sometimes you'll lose a person for a couple of years and then they come back in your life, or sometimes you go through life changes. You get married, you get divorced, you have children, different people come into your life, different people go out of your life. It's a natural progression. And I do think you have to be thoughtful about which people are your people, right? Which people are, and I don't mean that, in fact, by the way, I don't mean that to be exclusionary, because I actually think diversity is one of the strongest things one should seek in one's network is to have people of different walks and different types and different ages and different ethnicities and different backgrounds, because you learn so much from all those different people, and they open your eyes in a way you don't have it. But some people you resonate with and some people you don't. And especially when it comes to friendships, sometimes, and again, I'm much older than I'm pretty sure everyone who's going to listen to this, sometimes you end up picking friends for whatever reason. They're your roommate, or they sat next to you in class, or they were in your frat or something. And it turns out that you don't resonate with those people. And what I mean by resonate is you spend time with them and afterwards you don't feel better, you feel worse, or you feel like they're a drain on you, or they just don't, it doesn't feel good anymore. Well, listen to your gut. I'm a huge believer in listening to your gut, particularly when it comes to these sort of friendship relationships. And sometimes in order to make life room for new people, you have to sort of move on from the people who don't fit with you anymore. And that, again, I'm not talking about social climbing. I'm talking about sort of this deep resonance of who are the people that, again, the way I say it is, after I spend an hour with them, I feel more energy, not less energy. And by the way, people go through bad stuff, right? So sometimes someone needs you, and when you spend time with them, you have less energy because they're going through a divorce, or they have a parent who died, or their dog died, or something bad happened to them. It's okay. That's what we are all for as friends to each other. But if there is a constant taker in your life, and Adam Grant wrote this great book called Give and Take, which I also encourage people to read. If there's someone who's just a taker in your life all the time, you really have to ask yourself, do I want a person like that in my life?
Totally. You need to have these confidants and these people you trust who kind of know you from a work setting. And sometimes they can be just as valuable, as your, real quote unquote friends or your family in some ways, giving you advice. And that's one of the things I've just loved the most about friendships over time in a business context is you got someone who has 10 years of context or 20 years of 30 years of context on you. They're going to be really great at coming in, parachuting into your new crisis and helping you out through it, and you don't.
And again, I mean, sometimes work people through a work context who know you through work actually give you better advice because they understand you in your work context.
Totally.
I mean, you hear people talk about work-life balance all the time, and I look at it this way. You're going to spend more hours working than not working. I mean, that's kind of the nature of the society we're in today. Why not find a workplace where you can do meaningful work and have meaningful relationships? And so to me, I really like the expression work-life integration, that the idea is, and some of my best friends are my work friends. Some of my best friends are people who have nothing to do with work. Some of my friends are people I used to work with that we now don't work together at all, but we're still good friends. So to me, if I had to go to work every day with a bunch of people I didn't respect and didn't like, I mean, life's too short to do that. So I really encourage people, find that place where you're excited to go to work every day, not just because of the job you're doing, but the people you get to do it with.
All right, last question, Heidi, and this is a bit self-serving because it's probably the thing that I personally struggle the most with, and it gets back to more traditional networking settings that, the cocktail party or the, campus recruiting event. You know a ton of people, you probably bump into them all the time. How do you remember people's names? Do you have a system? Can you help us with this?
There's a lot of books on memory and using, mnemonics and other things I do try to put a little energy into remembering someone's name. I do try to think, who do I know that looks like them? Or if they have the same name as a famous person, I try to think, that person looks like that famous person, or, whatever, something like that. But, again, that's the beauty of LinkedIn and email and all that, is that you usually, very often, or I ask people for a business card and afterwards I'll just send them an email saying it was great to meet you, just because then I mean, literally, I can look up by date, right? I can look up and I can say, oh, what day on my calendar did I go to that event? Oh, that day. Well, then I can look in my email logs and see what emails I sent that night, and I can usually find the person by that. So there's no...
I'm embarrassed to say that I often go to the bathroom at networking events, pull out my phone and try to look up somebody's name. I'm like, I know that person. I need to go figure this out.
No shame in that.
Maybe that's a good place to end. Heidi, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate being included in what you're doing.
Okay, everybody, that was my conversation with Heidi Roizen. Warren, what'd you think?
Well, I thought the whole thing was pretty fascinating, and I learned so much. But one part in particular stuck out to me.
Cool.
And it's this idea that to build a strong network, that means that you might have to cut off some of your connections.
Cut off people. I thought networking was just adding people to the mix.
Well, I mean, that's what you think of, right? But it's not all about that. And no one really ever points that out. Like, some people they just don't make the cut.
Well, we'll spell it out a little bit, Warren. So why do you need to take people out of your network, or maybe even sort of de-emphasize?
Because your time is finite.
Okay.
You don't have room. I mean...
Well, but everyone, I mean, to do anything important in life, like to really be good at something, it takes time, takes energy. And so if you're going to try to build new relationships and really invest time in those relationships, it makes sense that you're going to have to de-emphasize other people. It's not like you need to write them a formal letter and say, hey, I just want you to know as of June 1st, 2017, you're severed from my network.
Yeah,
Doesn't have to be that intense.
We're not breaking up. There's no Dear John.
Yeah, there's no Dear John. But yeah, you don't, if certain people aren't giving you what you need either in time, or it's just not as fun, frankly, to connect with them, you don't have to email them every 6 months to keep up. You can let those lapse, and hey, maybe they'll come back.
So in your conversation with Heidi, what really grabbed you?
Okay, so you're right. There were a lot of good nuggets, but I thought one thing she said was sort of especially heartening. We were talking about networking when you're young, and this feeling that, especially when you're talking to older people who might be more accomplished than you think, I don't have anything to offer. Like, why should this person even pick up the phone? Why should they even respond to my email? Like, they've got so much experience. I'm so junior. And I thought she did a really beautiful job explaining that, like, just being yourself and being interesting and engaged and asking questions and being funny, that's enough. Like, that's, networking is about relationships. It's about conversations.
And that reminds me of signaling, what we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah. I mean, if you be yourself and you're genuine and you're curious, that's enough. You don't have to have like a huge LinkedIn profile yet.
Right.
You just got to be thoughtful.
This is weird to think about, but it's like networking. It's the real life version of your social networks.
Yeah, Warren, that's what social networks were.
Before them.
That's just like, I saw this place where you could buy books in person, and I was like, this is like the brick and mortar Amazon. I was like, what is this place? What are these things?
So another thing that kind of grabbed me, and I thought this might actually sing to Ignacio a little bit, is that she said, hey, if you're writing these emails, keep them short. Yeah, ask a few questions, be interesting, make sure to point out who connects you, but don't ever fib about that.
No, because that's easy to sniff out. And like, we're talking so short and so crisp that you got to make the subject line tight.
Speaking of Ignacio, how doth his network grow now?
Okay, let's get an update.
So where are you at in your process then in terms of researching what's next?
Kind of just talking to a lot of people, trying to... So
who are you talking to?
I'm talking to Ryan. Your cousin you sent me up with. Cool guy. And some people at Amazon that I met through my boxing class and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
All right, so as you can see, Ignacio is still out there networking, looking for jobs, but I actually have an update on the job that he was offered. Remember that outstanding offer he had?
Yeah, the one he was pretty excited about, but you were a little bit iffy on.
I mean, we talked about it, Warren. I wouldn't say that I, like, over the top gave him advice. I wasn't so heavy-handed, was I? I mean, we had a conversation. It was...
No.
It wasn't all me.
So where's he at now?
Well, let's listen.
All right, so just update us. Where are we at right now?
Well, I kind of... I talked to him and I kind of just told him, like, I think I was going to get an offer, but then I kind of just said, this again.
So what did you actually do?
I kind of just told the CEO, I told him, yeah, I mean, it seems like something I like for a little bit. So I emailed him, we were talking. But after a while, I'd kind of
I don't want you to do a disservice and, just come in and then leave in like 6 months.
Okay, so it sounds like that's Ignacio's version of saying that he passed on the gig?
Yeah. He's letting him down gently. So this is actually pretty monumental, I think, Warren. So Ignacio's still looking for a job. He doesn't even really have a lead yet, but he's turned down that gig that he was offered. He's in uncharted waters now. He's committing to the networking process. I actually don't know what happens next. This is all the tape we have on Ignacio.
Oh my God,
now.
we're caught up?
We're caught up. So, yeah, I mean, next time on The Grind, Ignacio figures it out. Or he doesn't, and we'll figure it out with him. So thanks, everybody. That's it for today.
Thanks to our musical contributors, PG Boo and Trackman Productions.
Great. Okay, so let's see. I feel like I have this like library of good endings I haven't been able to try lately. But okay, here's a good one. Ready? Grind diggity, grind out.
Okay.